This episode of This Agile Life has been brought to you by brilliantagile.com, providing Agile and Scrum training, consultancy, and personnel.
Brilliantagile.com. Done right, it's brilliant.
Recorded on Tuesday, July 30th, 2013, in St. Louis, Missouri, This Agile Life, Episode 19. Don't lose your groupthink. Welcome to This Agile Life, a podcast about what it's like to be agile in the real world. Hello, everyone. I'm the host of This Agile Life, John Sextro, and joining me today are my co-hosts, Nate Mackey. Hey, Nate.
Hi, John.
How are you today, Nate?
Hi, doing pretty damn well.
That's great. It's been a little while since we've been able to reconvene since our last duo podcast.
Yes, but we're not ready to give up yet.
Not quite. Not nearly close to giving up. Nate, also joining us tonight is Craig Buchek. Hey, Craig.
Hello, everybody.
How are you tonight, Craig?
I'm doing pretty good. Weather's been pretty nice except for the last couple of days. And it was amazing over the weekend.
It was very nice over the weekend. Well, guys, let's dive right in, pull a discussion topic from our ready queue. And our hot topic tonight is objections to Agile, as if anyone could possibly object to Agile.
Silly.
How silly of them. So we've got a number of objections here teed up tonight that we're going to discuss that I pulled out of a recent article, not so recent actually, it's over a year old, in Forbes magazine, the online version, of course. And they've got 10. We may not talk about all 10 of them, but the title of the article is "The Case Against Agile, 10 Perennial Management Objectives," and I've got a link to the article in our show notes. And we're going to kind of go through these and kick them around and maybe even talk to you guys on Twitter a little bit about what you think about some of these objections and what we've discussed. If you want to send us something on Twitter, you can tweet us at This Agile Life. So the first objection that I've teed up here for us to discuss tonight is that Agile is only for stars, only for teams of extremely experienced people. That's how I would define a star, somebody that is extremely experienced, smart, highly motivated, maybe even an overachiever. And the assertion here is that it will only work for people that are like that. What do you guys think? We'll start with Nate tonight.
Well, wow. I mean, if that's really what you're saying, then I have to kind of question your entire staffing plan. Because if you're saying that our staff is not smart enough to be agile, that means that you're not thinking very highly of your staff, and that maybe you should consider your interviewing and hiring processes, because why do you expect that you're going to get much of anything accomplished if your staff is really that incompetent?
Well, you have to admit half of all developers are below average, right?
By definition.
Exactly.
Oh, yes, that's very true. Yes. So, if you are going out and getting the cheapest developers you can find, just so you say you have a developer and, and expecting to put them together and have them accomplish something, I suppose the idea is that if you make your requirements clear enough and you get them all set up and the developers don't have to think very hard and they can just, use their favorite Microsoft tool or whatever to slap your application together. I suppose if that's your plan, I could see you having that objection, but that's a plan that has proven to fail over and over. Now I do have to say that there are aspects of Agile being really top notch at what you do that do require a really committed and capable developer. Some of the teams that are dedicated to test-driven development and driving their code to simplicity constantly, that does require a high level of coding maturity. But to say that Agile doesn't work unless you have those kinds of people, I think seems flawed.
Okay. Craig, what is your thoughts?
I have seen it, this falsified. I've seen what I would consider pretty much average developers, even people that haven't done development work for 10 years, go back to development. We started training them to do Agile, and we started training them how to do better at Java even, which is what we were using. And it worked out pretty well. The 4 months I was there, they picked it up pretty well. They were rolling with this. I think this goes to a lot of the management theories that you can't train people, or you should find people that already know what they're supposed to be doing. I found that people can be trained to do Agile quite well. As far as only for stars, I would say that the Rockstar programmers are probably less likely to be good at Agile because they want to go on their own. They want to prove themselves. They don't have as many social skills that are required for Agile.
Well, this idea that that we can go out and get the C-level developers, I suppose, just cobble a bunch of cheap ones together, and then seems to be a common pattern, but it will work in the case where you find one, maybe two of the rock stars you were mentioning to throw in there and be a hero and go in and fix everything, clean everything up when it gets broken, stay late at night, get it all worked out. But again, that is not a sustainable plan. That might get you a certain level, but having one person that really is the only one that knows how it works is going to hold your application hostage. So again, I just question the entire the entire premise that's would make you want to go out and find people that were not capable enough to do Agile, but somehow they were going to be able to put your application together.
Yeah, well, to build on that, good people will always do well, right? Despite bad processes sometimes. Although if your processes are really bad, they're probably not going to stay that long because they know they can find better. So I would almost say it's the opposite, that if you start using Agile, you'll probably end up with better people because better people tend to want to do things that work, and processes that work.
Yeah, so I think my feeling about this assertion that Agile is only for stars is completely false. I think that more than other planning-based methodologies, Agile can work for a vast group of skill sets and developers. I think that a lot of developers, really good developers, Craig, like you were saying, they'll persevere in any situation. You can throw them in the biggest, most dysfunctional project management setting or whatever sort of setting, and they'll manage to bang out really great code and do good stuff. If you put people with lesser skills, less experience, people that need more help into that sort of environment, I think that they would sink. And I think with Agile teams, there's a lot of regular communication that happens. There's stand-up meetings. There are planning meetings. There are retrospectives. And there's a lot of ways. There's often pair programming. There's a lot of ways to offset a lack of skills that someone has or create opportunities to improve on someone's skills. I definitely don't think you need rock stars to run an Agile team. And I think that quite the opposite is true. I think you can be very successful with people with a varying array of skills on an Agile team.
I would agree.
Let's call that one false, I think, huh? For all the reasons that we've stated. Let's move on to our next one tonight. Agile requires co-location, and our staff are geographically dispersed, whether it be across a large campus, across town, across the state, or on the other side of the world, some sort of geographical dispersion. That's a word. This is a tough one because I think I struggle with this, and I'll take a stab at this one first. My feeling is that with Agile and people that are geographically dispersed, it's no easier and no harder to work in that sort of a geographically dispersed situation. I don't think that it makes it any easier or any tougher to do it. What I'm saying is I think having a team of people that are dispersed around a state, city, country, globe, whatever, is hard. And I don't think Agile makes that any worse. Craig, what do you think?
I think Agile is difficult when you're dispersed geographically. I wouldn't want to start an Agile team that didn't have experience with co-located Agile. Working remotely is hard, like you said. Trying to add Agile to that mix would make it even harder, I think. But we do have a lot of tools now that we can do more of the Agile practices remotely. Things like Google Hangouts or screen sharing, all kinds of different screen sharing. There's code editors now that you can edit the same file at the same time. You can have 2 pointers on the screen at the same time. You can have audio or video at the same time. And sometimes people will have a monitor off the side to look at the person in the eyes while they're talking to them. And while you're editing on a different window. So I think it can be done. I have not done it myself yet, so I can't speak too well to it. I know I would probably struggle at first, but at least I have some Agile background behind me to make it a little easier the first time I try it. But actually probably will be. One of my friends is big in remote pairing, so I'll probably find out with him soon.
So it's, we did an entire episode on distributed teams, and I think this is one case where, a while back, I probably would have totally agreed that if you've got a distributed team, that you shouldn't be doing Agile. And I've been proven wrong on that, but I would still, like Mythbusters, maybe stamp a probable on this one. Just because, as Craig said, if you are going to do Agile for the first time and you're trying to learn it, to have everybody dispersed and trying to work together when they really don't know how to work together in a really team-based Agile environment could be pretty difficult. So I can see that if you're just starting out with a dispersed team and you've been doing waterfall and now you're going to switch to Agile, I would really try to get the team together for at least some period of time, working together for as long as you can, a month, a couple months before I send them out again, just to give them a chance to feel what it's like to work together in a close, collaborative environment, so that when they disperse, they can figure out how to replicate that.
Do you think, Nate, that it's innately harder to do development when you're geographically dispersed, regardless of whether it's using an Agile methodology or waterfall planning methodology?
Okay, well, let's assume that you had a waterfall project that could actually succeed, that you had written your, well, I'm being fair, it had a potential to succeed. Like, you've written your requirements out and they're all very clear and understandable, and everybody has a framework to work from, so they're building their code essentially the same way. If you had all of that, I think you could work in a distributed environment where people don't really talk to each other because they just do their little part and then they'd be done. I've worked in places like that. I've built applications that way that worked perfectly fine. And you have to do a lot of work, and you have to have a decent set of people to up front to get that to function. But then once you do, you don't need to do a lot of talking to each other. You can kind of communicate and maybe do code reviews and you'll be good. But I just feel like most places don't do that. They expect this group of people to figure it out. They don't know enough about development, and they just say, here are the requirements. You do this screen, you do this screen, you do this screen, and they think everything's going to be fine. And that's in a distributed environment is certainly going to make that worse than it would have been if everybody had been in the same place.
So, Nate, you're calling this one probable. I like the idea of giving it the Mythbusters confirmed probable, or
I guess it's plausible is what they stamp. So
plausible.
Plausible. So I'll call that plausible.
And if it's false, what do they call it then?
Busted.
Busted, right? Of course. Craig, what do you think? Is it busted, plausible, or confirmed?
I'd say it's somewhat plausible. So one of the Agile principles is the most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. So somehow you're going to have to overcome that burden.
Right.
So if you're able to overcome that burden, then fine. But it's going to be a fairly steep hill to climb.
And you made a good point, Craig. There are tools, Google Hangouts, we're using it tonight, Skype, a number of other ways to get face to face without being right next to each other in the same room. So tools can actually help you facilitate that principle of having face to face conversations.
Well, and if you look at the article, in the section where they kind of lay out the objection, it says, moreover, work extends beyond the development team since other stakeholders such as business analysts also require interaction. Hence, this limits the applicability of Agile. And that I'm going to have to totally disagree with. We successfully do work all the time when the customer is remote. And it's not hard to communicate in such a way with the customer that you can be successful at Agile. Now, I wish we could have our customer on site all the time. We would do better. We would be more effective. We would get stuff done faster. We would thrash less, but we certainly can be effective on an Agile team with someone outside the development team that is remote. And so that I would totally, I think, is bogus. But, if the development team itself is dispersed, that's a different case. So I would also, again, if your development team is totally dispersed, I would again question your premise. Like, why did you do that? Why did you create a development team that is completely separated? And really, is that worth whatever you think the benefit is? Is it worth all of the extra effort and overhead you're going to have to deal with to have them do anything effectively, Agile or otherwise? And so I would again question your reasons, your decisions for even having a team like that.
One of the things that happens there, I think, Nate, and I'm in this situation now where I'm part of an organization where they have grown through acquisitions. So they get pockets of good people here, there, and everywhere a little bit, right? So they might have somebody that's in California they got through an acquisition, maybe a handful of people, some of them that are in Portland that they got through an acquisition, some of them that are in India that is part of their outsourcing effort that they did. So then they end up with these pockets of people, and while they didn't particularly endeavor to go out there and get those people in those different areas, they have them, and they've pulled them together in various ways to try to make things work with the staff that they have. So sometimes it just happens, and it wasn't a mindful or a planful thing, but it's a situation that you can find yourself in some of these companies and organizations.
Right. Well, you just have to be aware of the cost that you're taking on by doing that. Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah. So Nate talked about not having the customer on site, and that's usually the biggest failing of most Agile projects that makes them not as agile as they should be. I find that another hill that's also hard to scale. That, if you're going to set yourself up for Agile, you really want to sets yourself up to succeed. And you should have your customer on site, and you should have all the team on site if you really want to succeed. And then you can maybe try pulling back from some of those agile principles.
All right.
Yeah. Again, starting out the first time, Craig, I think it is really important. Trying to if you're really trying to make agile work. So I'll go with you on that.
We'll mark that one as plausible, and let's move on to the next objection here. Agile only works for small projects, and all of our projects are big. I don't know that I've really heard this one a lot, and you have to start splitting hairs around what's small and what's big. I guess anything over 20 developers and 20 people on a team might be considered big, so we might put the limit there. Craig, you were going to say something?
I've heard this from agile people more than non-agile people.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too.
Oh.
So I somewhat agree that we don't know how to scale agile well beyond, I would say 10, and some people would say 5 or 6. So one of the principles we talked about was face-to-face conversation being the most effective means of communicating information. When you've got to communicate with 19 people instead of 5 people, that's a big difference. So it does have trouble scaling. That said, there have been some studies of people doing agile with teams up to, I think, at least 100, maybe 150, maybe more. I know Microsoft has done it. In fact, I've worked with someone, and we've all worked with someone that's worked with Microsoft in those larger teams.
Yeah, there's that it's Dean something. I know John.
Dean Leffingwell.
Dean Leffingwell is what I thought it was. A scaled agile framework who's got a pretty good overall structure for how you can do these kinds of large projects and fits within a fairly natural agile rhythm. So I think it can be done. I've also seen it done. It's hard, but as you said before, John, it's hard doing big projects no matter what, whether you're doing agile or waterfall. It's really hard to keep people in sync and doing what they need to do, and to just simply say, well, it's agile, and so we can't do it if it's big. You're ignoring the fact that how are you going to do it otherwise? Because if you're not doing regular deliveries and you're not proving that what you do works, and you're not making decisions as you go, then how are you going to be able to respond when things start to fall apart? And I've been on the big project, the enormous hundreds of people project that was not agile, and seen it, slowly crumble, all the while everybody thinking it was okay until the very end. It's hard.
Right. And you mentioned Dean Leffingwell. You mentioned his work on scaled agile framework. He'll even admit in some training that he gives that what he's proposing is not a blueprint. It's not a roadmap. It's not a take this, go and implement it, and you're going to be successful. It's some theories and some ideas for scaling.
Mm.
There hasn't been a lot of academic work, a lot of practical work that's been devoted to figuring out the right way to scale agile. I see organizations all the time that are struggling with this. I'm inside of one right now, and you do the best you can, but you just have to take the old "it depends" approach and figure out what's going to work well for the situation you're in. The bigger projects are, it seems like, the more oversight and the more management you want to throw at it, which can sometimes be counterproductive to a number of the agile principles, or at least counter to some of those agile principles. And so there's a struggle to keep things lean and mean without introducing a bunch of unnecessary status reporting and project management sort of reporting through some sort of a food chain. So you do things to try and break teams up into small self-organizing units.
I agree. I agree with Craig, though. I agree with Craig that it was the Agile people who started this whole thing. I mean, when we started doing Agile in the early 2000s, I remember reading Kent Beck stuff, reading other, big thinkers of the day about Agile, that it really only works in small teams, and that if you've got a large project, you shouldn't do it. So I think that's been propagated by the community itself somehow.
So I think your best way to approach a big problem is to break it up into smaller problems, right? And hopefully you can put different teams on those sub-projects, and then you don't have to worry about, those sub-projects. They can be agile in a small team. But the problem becomes, how does the hierarchical portions of that work? Does the project manager know how all the project's going? How does he communicate with all of that? And what about the dependencies that do go a little deeper between teams? So there can be issues, but I think there's going to be those issues if it's agile or not agile. I think agile wants to be smaller because it wants to minimize those communications to sort of outside groups.
Yeah, and there's a huge explosion of dependency management, like you're alluding to, Craig, as you start to break out into multiple teams, and you have that dependency management already on small teams, where Joe might work on something or Bob's working on something, some other part of the system. However, managing the dependencies at that small team level is much easier than it is when you start to span it across multiple teams and teams of teams. The dependency management ultimately, I think, is the thing that kills scaling of scaling a project to a very large project with Agile.
I think we need a large project with lots of groups. You're probably going to break out the Gantt chart, and I would offer that if once you break out the Gantt chart, you're not Agile anymore.
No question about that. Yeah, Gantt chart is an epic fail right away. So, Nate, is it plausible, confirmed, or busted that Agile only works for small projects and not big projects?
I think we got to call that busted. There's too many examples out there of how it's worked.
I would go with a little bit probable, but maybe improbable.
Okay, I'm gonna give it a busted vote, so we'll call that one busted. Let's see what's next on our list, guys. We've got Agile lacks project management process. So, I added the so, by the way.
Yes, that was good.
Yeah. And, I guess the complaint here is from executives. They want project management process, or they want to feel like they want to get similar information out of the project management process that they had before. They want some sort of pulse on a project to understand, is it doing well? Are we on track? Are we on budget? Are we headed in the right direction? Is that what you guys read into this? The fact that the executives are saying Agile lacks project management process?
I guess that statement is confusing to me because I feel like there's certainly a lot of project management processes that you get in Agile. It's just that maybe the team is managing things more than a person that's directing everyone. Maybe that's the difference. But I'm guessing what they mean is predictive capabilities, or having some way where you think you've got control because you think that what the estimates are versus the end of the project, and therefore you feel like you've got some level of control. I've seen some fairly established project management processes like earned value be a complete disaster. And you think you use earned value because you feel like it tells you where you are and how far you're getting. But we were on an earned value project where they told us to give it. I think we got 50% credit for a task if it compiled.
Wow.
I know. And you type in print hello and you're done, right?
50%?
50%, I'm good. So I feel like there what these project managers are struggling with is I don't feel like I've got a full grasp on this because things are changing and the team is, saying that they need the code quality to be good. So they want to spend more time on something than I feel like they should be able to. So, again, I would question what are these processes that you think are really helping you, and can you prove that they're actually doing any good, or are they actually, just something that gives everybody a warm fuzzy about how the project's going,
and probably a false warm fuzzy,
right?
So
exactly.
Well,
I would agree with Nate there that we may keep the processes, but they might not be valuable processes.
Right.
So the thing that I see that I'm reading in on this one is that there were certain idiot lights on the dashboard, on the executive dashboard, right, that said, our project is red, our project is yellow, our project is green. And
right.
And maybe it's executives and management wanting that sort of project management process, as they call it, to be able to produce these milestones and dashboards and metrics that say we're spending this sort of money, we're earning this sort of value. And I hear that. I think that there are corollaries in the Agile world to fill in for what management and what executives have been expecting from their projects that were waterfall or a planning process, I guess. And some of those that I'll offer is regular demos of working software. We all know that the best measure of progress on a project is working software. One of the things that I think might, and I hope no executives or managers take this the wrong way, but you actually have to get up out of your desk, out of your office, walk over to the Gemba, so to speak, over to the real place where the work gets done and see the work as it's being done, or see the finished product as the result of a demo, rather than looking at some project dashboard, red, yellow, green light sort of thing. And maybe there's a little bit of that, getting comfortable with seeing working software, which seems odd, rather than just some red, green, yellow light on a dashboard on a status report.
Think about waterfall. There's so much comfort there for people who are managing projects because there's so much appearance of progress. When you say we're gathering requirements, we're gathering, look at all these requirements we're getting, look how big this document's getting, and you can show that we're doing stuff all the time, and then we're done, and then now we're going to go to development, and we're developing. Oh, look at all this code we're producing. All right, this is great. Okay, we're almost done. We've done these screens. We've got 50 more to go, and we'll get them all done. And it's not until you get to the end when you're testing the thing and it's totally broken and everybody hates it. No, it's not until then that anything's wrong, and then you've got so many people you can blame it on. You can blame it on the developers, you can blame it on the designers, you can blame it on the people who gather requirements. It's like it's just a project manager's heaven to have that, because you can delay. I mean, maybe by the time it gets to testing, I've gone and found another job, and it looks like I've done an amazing job up to that point, and I use that to leverage and get double my salary at another job because of this great job I'm doing. So I can totally understand why they would want to hang on to those things, but you're totally right, John, that working software is really what matters. And it doesn't matter it may make you sad that the working software, the little bits of it that are being built, take longer than you expect, and that blows up your plan, and that those stupid users keep coming in and asking for stuff that's important to them, and it's messing up this all grand scheme that you had for when the thing was going to get done. And that's all painful and hard. And I can totally understand why project managers don't like that. That feels yucky compared to this nicely structured thing that they had when they had waterfall. But, the whole premise is flawed, that having good project management tools is the end all be all of the thing. No, working software. That's what matters. And that's the problem here.
So I think my summary and answer to this would be Agile has different processes.
Yep.
For management.
Okay. I think that one's busted, right, guys? Totally busted. Okay, let's see what we've got next. This one, our good friend Craig Buchek added into this. Agile is slower. What? And TDD and pairing especially. Double what? Explain yourself, Craig.
Well, most of the people I've seen introduced to Agile, they see pairing and they see TDD and they're like, okay, you put two people on the same task. It's going to take longer than one person. Well, two people doing it independently. And if I'm writing all these tasks, it's going to take longer than if I didn't write the tests. I think my short answer to this is the theory that there's never time to do it right, but there's always time to do it over. If you're that type of manager, then Agile's probably not right for you. But if you're the type of manager that actually likes to get it done right the first time, then you should take a look at these. And I'll admit, especially pairing seems so counterintuitive that it would be faster to have two people working on the same screen. But just try it. Give it a couple days even. There's lots of reasons why it works. My favorite answer why it works is that when you have a question and you're doing over it for minutes or hours or days, and then you go ask someone, and before you even get the words out of your mouth, you get the answer in your head. And what if you could do that all day long? So I think that you need to try it. I've found that TDD and pairing aren't slower in the long run at all.
It's hard for people to walk around and see two developers on the same computer in a pod or in an Agile workspace. And I'm talking about people that don't know any better. And just observe that and say, hey, one guy's doing nothing, right? That's sort of what it looks like. Doesn't it?
Yes.
Especially
half of your people probably would be doing nothing anyway.
But that's not the point. I mean, right. That's not how I would explain it. What I would explain, and you said it, Craig, is that we don't have time to do it right, but we have time to do it wrong. I will freely admit that if you do test-driven development, you may very well write 3 to 4 times the amount of code that you would write if you didn't do test-driven development. However, the difference is you know you've done it right. You have a higher probability that you've done it right the first time, rather than having to go back and thrash through some sort of bug reporting process and fixing process and waste time re-engaging and relearning about the code there and applying a fix and redeploying it and then having the testers look at it again and then find something else wrong with it, right? It's so I think it looks like you might spend more time, or it looks you are writing more code, but you're writing more quality code. Come at me. I see you thrashing around over there, Craig.
No, I don't disagree. I don't know about 3 to 4 times as much code, maybe 2 times as much code with the test, but even that, I don't find it. But and as far as the testing goes, there's been studies that show the later in the process that you find the bug, the more it costs money and time to go fix that bug. So if you can find that bug before it happens with a test, before you even wrote the code, then you save the time and money. If you can find it in the code review, you save time and money before it gets to QA. And pairing is basically a continuous code review process. So I think if you look at it in that perspective, you can find some of the ways that it actually does save you time in the long run.
I agree. Nate, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, pairing is one of those really hard things to to pin down on. And it's interesting. Probably the most frequent question I get asked by people who are interviewing is, how does pairing work? It doesn't seem like it would work. If you went to the auto mechanic and you saw, two people standing there over your car, one with a wrench doing something and the other one standing there talking to them, and then you saw in the bill that you were charged for two people to do the job, you'd be enraged. And so it just seems like it wouldn't work. And yet there's, if you were in a situation where you just did cookie cutter stuff all the time, you solved the same problem over and over and over, and you had a very simple process or simple problem set to deal with, then pairing would be useless. But because applications, and particularly applications that change constantly, have so much complexity, it is not enough for one person to be sitting there trying to solve that problem all by themselves in a vacuum when there are so many other people, and particularly if you can switch enough the knowledge of the entire code base that you could be accessing, both for yourself and for the other person, because the places that don't do pair programming also probably don't switch tasks. So you probably have a person working on a problem, a screen, a stored procedure, whatever it is they have, for forever, and then they finish it and it's all theirs, and now they move on to something else. And so the pairing has built-in code, collective code ownership, and there's so much value to collective code ownership for a business. I mean, just talk about risk management, risk mitigation, having every developer, and they're the only ones that ever look at and know how a particular area of the code works, and they all do it differently. That's what blows me away, is that just the risk mitigation that you have by having a pair is huge for your business. You're creating something new. You're not fixing a car that was in a situation and needs to get back to that situation. There is one working state for a car. There's one perfect state that if you go in there and you see what's wrong and you fix it. But code is not like that. You're always building something new. It's always something added on that wasn't there before. And just to have only one person that knows about that seems really incredibly risky if businesses would stop and think about it. Besides all the reasons you mentioned about how you get ideas you solve problems faster, you have better quality code. There's so many benefits of pair programming. It's funny that it is the most slowly accepted practice, because it's just huge. You just go on and on and on and on about all the benefits.
It is. It seems like it's the toughest thing to sell to executives and to management when you discuss Agile. Like, I'm good with everything else, but no pairing.
And if you find a developer that's bought into it, it's the toughest thing to take away from him.
That's right.
Good point. I'll tell you one of the things that immediately strikes me with pairing, or immediately struck me with pairing when I started doing it, was, man, I can't slack off anymore.
Yep.
Or, man, it's really hard to slack off now. It's not like Office Space where I tell the Bobs I can come in and I basically space out for about an hour every morning, and then go get a cup of coffee, and then go to lunch, and then I actually do about 15 minutes of work a week. When you're pairing, you can't slack off like that, or it's a lot harder to slack off like that. And I'm a slacker, I'll admit it. And I want to slack off sometimes, but when your partner's poking you in the ribs saying, "Hey, we're working on this. Let's do this," or "Come on," it's a lot harder to for both people to kind of slack off at the same time. Does it happen? Sure, of course. I'm sure it does. They both get up and go walk off and get coffee or something. But I think you're a lot more productive. And that is something that has really sunk in with me in pairing, is that you spend a lot more of your 8-hour day being productive when you're pairing than you ever did when you were by yourself writing software. Plus, you spend a lot less time going down rabbit holes and rat holes and doing things that aren't really going to be valuable, because your pair partner will say, "Wait a second, what are we doing? What are you going off and doing this and that? We need to do this other thing. Let's get focused again." And that's the real value that the other pair often adds, is that as you're passing that keyboard back and forth, you're really keeping each other engaged and staying very sharply focused on the task at hand.
Yeah, the times when I most hated my life when I was a developer were those long nights sitting by myself in the office. Everyone has gone home, and I'm trying to figure out why this really simple thing doesn't work. And it was always, one time I remember distinctly, there was a space at the end of a text file line that was blowing up everything, something I could not see. And it took me probably 6 hours to find that. And that's the kind of thing that if I had a pair or if I had a team to turn around to, I would have figured out in moments. And, that's the situation. All that time I wish I could get back.
I can't agree more. And I had that exact experience today, and I almost threw up after I realized what had happened. I was working on some JavaScript. I was not getting any sort of a legible compiler errors. I was getting some very nonsensical error that did not point me in the direction of what the problem was, and I had a typo. It was just a friggin' typo. And I thought to myself, I just spent an hour and a half trying to figure out this typo. And all the code was right except for a stinking typo. And it made me sick. And that, I'm sure, would not have happened if I had a pair. Okay, so Agile is slower. I think that's busted, right, guys?
I would say so.
Totally busted. All right, guys, I think we have just enough time to talk about one more, and that one is our firm's individual accountability system doesn't fit Agile. And the way I translate this is that organizationally, we incentivize people based on individual performance and not on the principle of a shared accountability system for a project, right? So there's a impedance mismatch in how they incentivize their people.
There's some interesting truth to this. And it's something we've struggled with, the whole concept of group ownership and the flaw of group ownership, the tragedy of the commons type thing. That, if I'm not personally accountable for something and the group is accountable, then if things go wrong, what does that mean? If we fail in some way, if either we horribly miss our deadline or we create, total junk, what does that mean? Who is supposed to be responsible for that? Who is supposed to deal with that? It's not an easy problem. And I understand the concern from an organization who typically is used to, I know exactly who's responsible for this. It's Fred, and Fred is going to, get axed, or he's going to get demoted, or whatever, or he's going to get a stern talking to, or whatever it is. And it's much harder when there's a group of people that's responsible. I'm not sure this is a casual problem. It's something that if everything goes right, it's awesome. If things go wrong, this is a real issue.
So I was thinking about this in terms of how do you give promotions or raises or whatever. And it is hard to figure out, who's the reason for this team working well or not working well. And to me, the answer there is the team members all know who's contributing the most, or at least have a good feeling. And I think in that regard, it's sort of a change in the process that you have to do peer reviews to get those answers instead of looking at the work itself. But team ownership, you could also say that, the team as a whole either gets the same raise or the same blame. It's another way to do it, I guess.
Yeah, so a shared friend of ours once said to me that if you're going to incent people individually based on their performance on a team, if you take that approach, you're going to destroy the groupthink, the shared ownership thing, because it then becomes, and I think there's some truth in this, it then becomes a me versus them mentality, right? Where if I'm being forced ranked in an organization, which tons of organizations do when they do their end of the year assessments of their people, they force rank them. What incentive do I have if I'm a top performer on that team to help the lower performers on the team? Probably none.
Right. That's exactly right.
Because I only succeed by other people's failure. It's force ranking.
No, I completely agree with you. And we've actually tried some of this when we were first getting started and didn't totally understand that, and have seen it fail magnificently. If you try to compensate people for how much work they do, then they will get enormous amounts of really crappy work done. If you try to incent them with quality, then they will find ways to blame the system, blame someone else for why the quality is not good. There's always ways around it if you're trying to incent individuals in this case, and it's again, it's a problem. But what do you want? Do you want an organization just with individuals that accomplish things and just rely on the hero culture, like I said, to bail you out when you get in trouble? If that's the basis for running your business, then you're probably right that Agile is not going to work for you. If you want a team environment where the collective, intelligence and capability is applied on every problem and swarmed on things to be able to create the best possible product, then this is a problem you've got to figure out. You have to do what it takes to find the bad apples and give people a feeling that when they try hard, they get compensated and they're incented to be part of the group and yet to perform as an individual. It's not an easy problem to solve.
Yeah, and most organizations today thrive on or excel at fostering that hero mentality on their teams. And those are the things that they reward because it's easy. It's easy to see Joe working until 10 p.m. every night and going crazy. I think it's harder to do things differently, but there are different things you can do. There are different things that you can try. And if you make a team, look at a team as a single unit and you reward them, they succeed and they fail as a unit, then there are dynamics and there are things that happen within that team that will equalize things. If somebody is underperforming, the team will either try to bring that person up to the same level of performance as the rest of the team and get as much out of that person as they can, help develop that person, or possibly and tragically they might drum that person out. But something is going to equalize itself there, and you're probably going to end up with a better team and a better product as a result of that. Nate, have you guys seen that, or have you tried that? I just haven't seen organizations that are willing to take that step in their Agile transformations yet.
So which step do you mean?
Just stop evaluating individuals.
I see.
And evaluate the unit, evaluate the project team.
Yeah. No, we have not done that. I think our approach has been, at least to talk about what to do, has been to try to create an environment that is open and honest about what people are doing, and try to allow people to have permission to say, hey, you're slacking off, or this code that you created is not up to the level that we said we would accomplish, and that's okay to call somebody out in a respectful way. Again, that's hard, and that's something that has to be fostered and almost taught how to do that properly. But I think that's the way we would go about solving the problem, is just to try to create more honesty, where the team can not point fingers, but identify when someone is not doing what they said they would do in the context of the team's agreement or charter or basic rules of conduct.
I think for the most part, this is a case of if you trust your team, they'll do the right thing. So there won't be any blame to get for the most part. And where that falls down, the team usually, like you said before, is able to figure it out on their own. It's only when like the whole team fails, we're trying to figure out, I think it's the raise where it's a little more difficult.
Right. Because they might try, if everybody, all things being equal, if the team is just going to be evaluated and the people on the team are going to be evaluated based on whether or not the project succeeds, that's going to cause one set of outcomes. If each person is going to be individually assessed for their contributions to the project, then things change drastically. And again, as I said, I think you have people that start forgetting about focusing on bringing up younger people or less experienced people on the team. They stop cultivating people and they just focus on, hey, I'm going to go 150 miles an hour in this direction, show everybody that I'm kicking butt and taking names, and not worry about whether or not the project succeeds, because ultimately the way I'm being evaluated and incentivized is based on the amount of effort that I put forth towards the project's success. But if it fails, I can just blame it on intern Tony or whatever.
Yeah, I know. It's I totally hear what you're saying, and I do not disagree at all. It's just that's a hard problem. I personally think it's not an Agile problem. It's a teamwork problem. And so the question it's not the case against Agile. It's the case against teams. Do you want to have teams or do you want to have individuals? If you want to have teams, then this is a problem you have to deal with. Because if you incent individuals and you focus on individuals and you focus on purely individual accountability, you're going to get a situation where you have people looking out for themselves and not for the good of the team or the project, and to the detriment of others. So you've got you're blaming Agile for something that is probably an overall assumption that you're making needs to be questioned.
I think that says it all, Nate. And on that note, I think we can call this one Busted then.
Absolutely.
Great. Guys, we're out of time for the discussion topics. That was a wild and raucous discussion. I had a lot of fun with that. Let's
there's some major soapboxing going on there.
Oh yeah. That's the best kinds of podcasts. Let's do our picks, and Nate, will give you the honors, sir.
All right. Well, I have a couple. One I think is very appropriate for our discussion. It's an article from a project management website. It's the most convincing reason to change from waterfall to Agile. It's an interesting article, and we'll put the URL in the show notes. But after kind of identifying, in general, what all the objections are, why Agile might be better. The guy who writes the article kind of focuses on, how much of all those requirements that you gathered when you did waterfall, how much of those did you actually accomplish? And, the answer tended to be 15 to 25%.
Wow.
And 45% was kind of the top level, with the exception of maybe some guys from NASA. So that's, that speaks to, and then what he goes on to talk about is that speaks to how much waste there is in waterfall. And this is the same thing that we get used to when we start doing lean, is that the bigger our backlog of requirements or a list of stories or whatever it is gets, the more, just uncomfortable you start to feel, because you just know all that stuff's going to change. And now you've assembled, you spent all this time building this huge backlog, and now it's all going to change. And that's just indicative of whole waterfall ideas, that we spent a whole lot of time doing stuff that we're going to end up throwing away. And why did we do that? Why didn't we just get right to the code? So anyway, that's a good article I would suggest for you. The other one's a little more fun. It talks about Wolfram Alpha, which I hope you're familiar with. It's a a website built by the guys who made Mathematica, and we actually have a guy working at Asynchrony who used to work at Wolfram Alpha, and it's a great site for just trying to put facts together. And so this person from Business Insider comes up with this entire list of all these things that you could do that you probably wouldn't have thought of, from a really in-depth understanding of the weather to the various probabilities in different kinds of gambling activities, to sports questions. How many times did the Giants win at away games versus the Cowboys, and things like that. So things you might not have considered asking has a list of 32 different things you can ask Wolfram Alpha about. So I thought that was kind of fun.
So what I heard there was Wolfram Alpha can help me win at gambling.
Absolutely, or at least be smart about it.
Good. Craig Buchek, what are your picks, man?
My first pick is PhoneGap or Cordova, depending on where you get it from. So I've got a side project working on a mobile app, and since it's just me, I don't have a lot of ability to spend a lot of time on it. So with PhoneGap or Cordova, I can write it basically in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, make it work on iPhone and Android, and it works pretty good for the most part. For most the kind of apps I write, at least. My second pick is using Markdown to build your resume and storing your updates in GitHub. So this way I actually have a Markdown source for my resume, and I can create a open doc format. I can create a PDF, I can create HTML, I can create plain text out of one. So I don't have to update 3 or 4 different formats of my resume.
This is a fabulous idea.
I like that.
Do you have a link or a how-to or anything on this, or is this something you're just doing on your own, Craig?
A friend of mine, Scott Granneman, wrote up a blog entry on it. I'll link to that in the show notes.
That would be awesome. Thank you, Craig. Okay, I got a couple of picks here too, guys. My first one is using RSS to facilitate stand-ups.
RSS is dead, John. Everybody knows that.
It's dead? I didn't
just ask Google Reader.
I got the Google Reader memo. I mean, this podcast is enabled by RSS. I sure hope it's not completely dead.
I love RSS. It infuriates me how it's getting a bum rap. Go ahead.
Yeah, really simple syndication.
Yep.
Well, a lot of tools out there, a lot of the Agile lifecycle management tools produce RSS feeds for the activity that goes on within the Agile lifecycle management tool. So one thing that I've been toying with and playing with at work is a way to use that stream as a way to help facilitate stand-ups. Now, what we actually do, and what a number of Agile teams do, is we talk to the board, or we talk to the work board that we have representing our process and the work as it's moving across the board. If you don't happen to have a board, you might consider using the RSS feed that comes out of your Agile lifecycle management tool as an alternative to talking to the board, and it might be a way to tickle people's memory, remind them of the things that they did the day before, so that they can, give some relevant and share some relevant and insightful information at the stand-ups. And I don't have any sort of an article or anything to link to on that one, but I'm working on a blog post for that, so maybe at some point I'll have one to put in the link.
That's a cool idea. So do you show that on a screen, or you just kind of use it for yourself on your phone? How does it drive the stand-up?
I envision it in both ways. I envision that an individual could use it just to remind them of what they did. They can scan through what the team has done. But if you don't have a Kanban-esque workboard that you look at, then the alternative might be to take a look at the RSS or the stream that is produced to help everybody remember what went on, where things are at. You can say, oh, hey, yeah, I moved that one to blocked, so we need to talk about it.
Right. It's kind of like your Facebook news feed or something.
Yeah, same idea. My second pick, not so much a pick as it is kind of a tip, and it's just the concept of keeping time. One of the things that I've been very aware of in my career is that, and especially I guess when I started to have kids, and not to be nostalgic, but my oldest daughter's 13 years old now, and Nate, you kind of know this too, that time, you just never get that time back. You know, time is that never-ending stream that flows past us every day. And so the idea here is to somehow remind yourself of that fact, that every day is a opportunity to advance the state of the project and to make progress on the project. And one of the ways to keep that in mind is to just simply keep time in my case, it's the iteration of the sprint. What day is it? It's day 7 of sprint 10. And that just helps, I think, everybody keep in mind that, hey, we're better than halfway through this sprint. We need to start thinking about wrapping things up. We have a demo in a couple of days, and just helps everyone focus. And so a while back, I did a blog post on this, and I'll include that in the show notes so that folks can take a look at that tip in a little more detail.
Very cool.
Well, guys, that's all we have time for. I think we've gone just about an hour. That was a great conversation.
Yeah.
And I hope everybody in our listening audience enjoyed it too. If you want to talk back to us and make any comments about any of those Agile objections that we discussed, I'd like to encourage you to reach out to us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @ThisAgileLife, and I keep a close eye on that, and we'll talk back with you and kick around ideas and maybe even ask you to come on the show to talk about some of those ideas. So hit us up on Twitter. Nate Mackey, thanks for joining me today. How can people find out more about you?
Well, I have a Twitter feed. It's at Nate Mackey, NATEMCKIE.com. Sorry, at Nate Mackey. And then I post every once in a while on the Asynchrony blog. So that's blog.asynchrony.com. ASYNCHRONY.
Great. Thanks, Nate. And Craig Buchek, thanks to you as well. How can people find out more about you?
I tweet at Craig Buchek, CraigBuchek, and you can find me at GitHub as Booch, BOOCH.
Awesome, Craig. And you guys can follow me on Twitter as well. You can find me at JCSextro, and you can also find me at my website, johnsextro.com. And be sure to check out our website at thisagilelife.com to find the show notes for this podcast. Thanks for listening, and keep living this agile life.